So this is going to be a Friday Reads video, and it's been a very long time since I've done one of these, but I thought I'd sit down and do one today, talk a bit about what I read this past week and what I'm planning to read this weekend. I actually have a long weekend because Monday is a day off for public servants in lieu of Remembrance Day, which is on Saturday. So I will be going to a Remembrance Day ceremony tomorrow, and Monday it's just kind of a holiday, a day off to make up for that. So I get a little bit of extra reading time this weekend. So I started off the week pretty ambitious. I ended up reading last weekend a book that I'd picked up at the Chapters. I just wandered in after seeing a movie. Saw this on the display at the front. It's Crying for the Moon by Mary Walsh. And it was okay. It wasn't fantastic. It wasn't really good. It had a lot of unfulfilled potential, I felt. I wrote down a couple things on a sticky note here. There was a lot of telling and not enough showing. We bounced through a number of years very, very quickly. The kind of inciting incident of the novel happens, and then the author kind of tells us everything that gets us up to the point where she is at the end of the novel. She grows up in small town Newfoundland. She and her friend go with their Catholic school, the Catholic school's choir, to Montreal to sing at an event at Expo 67, which was the World's Fair held in Montreal in 1967. And she and her friend sneak out at night. They're certainly not supposed to be doing this because not only are they with a Catholic school, but this is the 1960s, and they're 16 years old. But her friend gets really, really drunk, ends up hooking up with a guy, and she decides to stay in Montreal and work for this guy. So she ends up going back to her small Newfoundland town without her best friend, and because of one encounter, or possibly the second encounter that she had while in Montreal with a couple of men, she soon finds herself pregnant and kicked out of school, and she ends up in an abusive relationship. Her parents take away her baby from her the moment that the baby is born. She doesn't know whether it's a son or a daughter. She just recalls her parents taking her to this hospital in the city, being put under, and waking up to find her baby gone. And her parents telling her that the baby has gone to be adopted somewhere. And she had no say in this, and she wants her baby back. And because of this kind of traumatic experience, the loss of her child so earlier in life, and because she was kicked out of high school, she has a really rough life in this book. But there were just too many time jumps and not enough showing, not enough exploration of her life, of the moments leading up to this crisis, the death of her boyfriend, which takes up a large part of the novel. So that is one that I read, Crying for the Moon by Mary Walsh. Then I stopped into the thrift store the other day, and I picked up, they have a deal, 4 paperbacks for $1, so I picked up 4 paperbacks, just on a whim, ones that I had never heard of. And I picked up Garden of Shadows by V.C. Andrews. Never heard of this author. Come to find out, this is part of a series. It's kind of the prequel to a book called Flowers in the Attic that I'm kind of keeping an eye out for. I bought this one because of the cover. It's got roses on it, and I adore roses. But it's very it's very overdramatic. It's a slow burn, but it's overdramatic because you have these crazy things happening. You have a young woman who's very tall, not really considered that attractive, living in the United States, and she's in her mid-20s by this point. considered past the marriageable age. This is the early to mid 1900s, if I recall. Definitely before World War II. I should really remember this more. I think I was more concerned with the actual plot of the novel than the setting. But this man comes along, and after just a couple of meetings, they decide to get married. He's got a rather large estate that she's going to look after the house for, and she thinks that she's found like her perfect romance, that her life's going to be great from now on. But her husband isn't in love with her at all. He chose her because she's sensible. He doesn't like traditionally feminine women because he doesn't feel he can trust them. He has some mommy issues, and she has a couple of children. He's very violent towards her. But she has a couple of children, gets control of this house, and then her father-in-law shows up with his young bride to move back in. And I don't know how to put this, her stepmother-in-law, who it seems to be about younger than her, indeed, this woman who's younger than her, is very beautiful and reminds her husband of his mother. And he becomes infatuated with her, which of course bothers his wife and causes some issues. And there's a lot of incest in this novel, and it was actually a really good read though, and I do want to read Flowers in the Attic. Nothing literary about it, nothing serious about it, but it was a highly kind of entertaining read. I have heard this referred to as a horror novel. Flowers in the Attic is a horror novel as well, but it didn't seem like that at all. So I read that one, and then I picked up another one of those books from the thrift store, How Like an Angel by Margaret Miller. This is a great mystery library. This one also picked it up for the cover, and this one is probably the worst one I read this week. I ended up skimming through the end of it. You have this private detective who's also a gambler who has lost everything, and he gets kind of abandoned on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere by this guy who he had been hitchhiking, and he'd bummed a ride with this guy, and this guy wasn't going any farther, and so he's just kind of wandering around on this road, and then he sees this convent slash cult. He basically comes across a cult that's living out in the middle of nowhere. He stops off there for the night for some food and drink and whatnot, and he meets the sister there, one of the sisters, who pays him a little bit of money that she's been hiding and saving up. All their worldly goods, all their money was supposed to go to the cult leader, but her son has been sending her money, $20 each year, and she gives it to our private detective on the understanding that he'll go and track down this man that she mentions. He assumes that it's perhaps a long-lost relative or a friend or a lover or something. All he has to do is confirm that he is indeed still living in this town, that he's alive, and give whatever information he can get from him to this sister. But he's not supposed to approach him or interact or let him know who's asking about him. So he accepts the money, goes to this town that she's mentioned, and discovers that this man has been dead for 5 years. And he disappeared actually, in kind of a mysterious way. All they found was this car and a little bit of blood and some clothing, and he had just vanished. So it's a mystery novel in that regard, but you've got this weird cult stuff going on, and the mystery itself doesn't come across as that important. And we're not sure why this private detective is sticking around, because the private detective is kind of portrayed as He's a gambler. He's someone who will take your money if he can get it and just take off. In fact, we half expect him to not even go looking for this man, to just take the $120 and disappear because there's nothing this sister can do about it. But he doesn't do that. He pursues this mystery, but yeah, there's there's not really a clear motive for him to be doing that. Yeah, so that's what I've read. I am partly through something called Chain Reaction that I borrowed from the library, from my university, and I'm feeling very guilty because it's absolutely falling apart. It's from the 1970s, and I don't think it's been opened in possibly a couple decades, because as I'm turning the pages, the spine is just cracking and disintegrating and all the pages are falling out. So I tried to tape in a massive chunk, but now I've just kind of given up and I'm just tucking things in and it'll be up to them at the library to deal with it. So I feel bad about that, but it's not really my fault. It's just an old book. And they might end up just retiring this one after I return it. Yeah, but this is called Chain Reaction, and it's by Gordon Pape and Tony Aspler. And this is something that was published in 1978. And it's kind of I'm going to call it dystopian novel in a way. Basically what has happened is I think it's supposed to be like the late 70s, early 80s, and it's been about a year since a referendum in Canada, in Quebec, in which the majority voted to leave Canada, which is contrary to history. There have been 2 referendums, and in both cases, the vote was just narrowly no, a yes to stay in Canada, a no to separate. Actually, in the 90s, it was within a percentage, very, very close to having a yes vote for separation. But this book was written in the 70s, and it based its plot on the assumption that the vote was yes for separation. And of course the Canadian government is concerned, you've got the American government concerned, you've got business interests concerned, you've got, for whatever reason, the United Kingdom's economy is like crumbling at this point. You've got them concerned that the separation of Quebec is going to make the global economy more unstable, because the Canadian economy is going to absolutely tank, and possibly part of the American economy along the border because of those business interests. You have, so you've got the CIA involved, you've got France's government working behind the scenes trying to figure out what's going on. And then you have kind of a lone wolf Anglo-Canadian who decides that he can end this all if he shoots the Premier of Quebec. So he goes ahead and he assassinates the Premier of Quebec, causing more instability and kind of a power struggle within the party, within the province, because you have 2 key candidates who are running for the position of leader of the party, and consequently the position of Premier. And so you have all that going down. You've got a couple of different characters. You've got a young woman who wants to assist with one of the campaigns. You've got Anglo-Canadian newspaper reporters trying to get the scoop on what's going on. You've got the CIA characters. Actually, one of the CIA guys attempts to take out one of the candidates. He misses his shot and is beaten to death by the crowd. So you have all this instability, and it's kind of a what if As you can see, a fractured maple leaf on the cover of there. It's a what if things had gone the other way. And it's interesting to read this because a lot of the issues brought up in this book are very real issues that are brought up whenever the separatist debate is discussed. And they're issues that could be relevant in the future again. So that's an interesting book. I can't say very much for likability of characters or literary stuff. It's more interesting just for its content, what it deals with. And then as well, I'm hoping to read, gotta reach for this one, Stephen King's Christine. I ordered this from Amazon this week, and there was a knock on my door last night, and it was delivered by UPS, I think. I actually had to sign for it, which was weird. Signing for a $15 book. But yeah, so this is what I'm up to this weekend.